Greetings. My name is Jeremiah Robinson. I am president of Information Assets Incorporated, a business intelligence and data analytics consulting firm. My job is to help companies and nonprofits reduce uncertainty so they can make decisions. So I'm going to present a series of videos that you can watch if you're interested that can help us as individuals, companies, nonprofits, government agencies, etc., think about how we as companies, individuals, etc., assess our individual risks around things like going to the store, getting together with our friends, deciding how much to open our particular business. We have guidelines for how states should be operating. But one of the things we've learned about this disease is it's very different county to county, and your risk can be very different from week to week, depending on what's going on in terms of coronavirus. And how much we know is not everything, but we know enough to make some decent decisions. So my job is to reduce uncertainty so businesses can make decisions. So I want to present some data to help you all reduce your own uncertainty so you can make more informed decisions around what you want to do around coronavirus. So I'm going to share some data, and I'm going to start by introducing a concept called 12-day infectious cases. So the research I've been able to find is not entirely consistent, but it's pretty consistent about how long, when somebody gets COVID-19, they are contagious for. And a relatively conservative estimate, because many people have the disease but never show any symptoms. So people who've studies have been done on are mostly people who have symptoms. And those people probably are contagious for longer periods because they have worse cases. On average, a conservative value for how long people are contagious when they get the disease is about 12 days. So if we take how many people have been tested positive as of today and subtract out how many people had been tested positive as of 12 days ago, we end up with something like the number of people who are actively contagious at any given moment. So these charts here show the number of people who are actively contagious in each region of the country per 10,000 people who live in that region. So this first chart here shows a very obvious trend, which is that the Northeast has a lot more people who are contagious than most of the rest of the country. Most people right now who are contagious live in the Northeast. For every 10,000 people who lives in the Northeast, 63 people have been tested positive for COVID-19, meaning that probably about 10 times that amount are actually contagious. So about 630 for every 10,000 people are actively contagious in the Northeast. Most of the country is going down in terms of the number of the cases. The Midwest is actually rising. If we look in the Northeast, we can see that the Mid-Atlantic region has the most cases, although it's dropping pretty rapidly right now. Within the Mid-Atlantic region, we can see that New York, as has been on the news and everybody knows, has, let's see, can I click on this? Has the most, although that's starting to be eclipsed by New Jersey, because New York is dropping pretty fast. New Jersey's not dropping as fast. If we look in the Midwest, where I am physically located, we can see that things are still growing. Both the west north central part of the Midwest and the east north central part of the Midwest are both growing. The west north central is growing more quickly. In particular, we can see that Iowa is growing quickly, Nebraska is growing quickly, et cetera. But there's a relatively small number of cases. If we look at my part of the Midwest, we can see that Illinois is still growing pretty quickly in the number of cases. Wisconsin is in relatively good shape with not very many cases. So that's good news for me living in Wisconsin. And if we go further down a little bit, we can look at counties within Wisconsin, because most of my people who are going to be watching this will probably be within Wisconsin. And we can see, well, we can't see all the counties here. I think some of them are hidden. Can we see Milwaukee County here? So Milwaukee County is this blue one here. So Milwaukee County was known for having a lot of cases, but per 10,000 people, in terms of active cases compared to 12 days ago, it wasn't ever really that bad. The place that is actually pretty bad, though, is Brown County. It's not necessarily that bad nationally, but in terms of Wisconsin, it's definitely a lot worse than the rest of the state. And so we can see Brown County down here has 70 cases per 10,000 people. which is actually a little bit worse than the Northeast right now. So Brown County is a pretty rough place to be right now. I'm going to show one more visualization here, and then I'm going to cut the video, and we can have another video in a couple of days. This is one that's going to take a second to describe. So the rural-urban divide has been a big point of discussion, and I've talked about it when I've talked about this with people, about whether it's really safe to be in a rural area and not have to social distance, whether it's really just an urban disease. And the truth is, it kind of is an urban disease, but it is, gradually getting everywhere, right? And it's not as though the places that are more rural are that far behind the urban areas. And so it's spread a lot more quickly in urban areas, but it's also spreading in the more rural areas, and it's following this fascinating pattern. So this particular visualization is called a bubble race. The bottom line here shows the number of total cases within each bubble. The vertical y-axis shows the number of cases within each bubble per 10,000 people. Each of these bubbles is a grouping of counties in the United States by the population. So this bubble here is represents all the counties with less than 30,000 people in them, right? And these bubbles are relatively similar in terms of the total number of people within each bubble. So I've grouped the counties into groupings that have similar numbers of people. So there's about as many people as live in counties that have 0 to 30,000 people as there are as live in counties 30 to 50,000 people. So these are similar sized groupings. So this is a good way of thinking about, how are rural areas versus urban areas doing. So I'm going to press play, and this goes back to when the disease first hit the United States. So we can see there's so few cases here that you can't really tell what's going on. And note that this is a logarithmic scale, so differences between portions of this chart are pretty significant. Now we can see the urban areas are starting to get the disease a lot faster than the rural areas. But the smaller urban areas are basically following the bigger urban areas, basically in like a straight line fashion. So things are happening faster in the big and urban areas, but they're happening in the same way in the smaller areas, using the same pattern, just slower. And we can see that's also true with rural areas. They're following along the same path, similar growth rates, all this kind of stuff, just not happening as quickly. And this is where we're at right now, right? So we can see, the big areas, jumped up in terms of how many cases there were per person, and then started gradually, increasing the total number of cases. The same exact pattern happened in the smallest areas, jumped up in cases per 10,000 and started jumping over here in terms of total cases. And every different group shows this same pattern. So it's not as though, anything's fundamentally different about urban versus rural areas. It's just how fast things are happening, and how many cases there are right now per 10,000 people. So right now in rural areas, there's only about 8 cases per 10,000 people, whereas in heavily populated urban areas, there's about 68 cases per 10,000 people. And this is tested cases, so there's really 10 times that amount probably. So, there's 10 times more people in the urban areas who have the disease right now as in rural areas. So in rural areas, right now it's not as dangerous, but that's just a matter of time. It is nice that rural areas are having this delay, because they may not quite get all the way up to this point, or they may continue to lag significantly behind the urban areas, so that when a vaccine comes, they won't have had as many people get sick. Rural areas also have more older people in most cases, and there are a lot of very specific rural areas who've had really major outbreaks. There's a county in Arkansas, there's one in Iowa, etc. So I'm going to stop this video at this point. I'll publish more videos that get into more details, but this is sort of a big national picture that helps us to understand how some of these issues work together. Thanks a lot.